Good evening and welcome to tonight's episode of Free Media, Free Minds, Cape Town TV's show where we look at the free flow of information in our society, why it matters to our democracy, and of course some of the obstacles it faces in its way. Tonight we're going to be looking at the question of cell phones. Of course, for many years you needed a lot of money to make media, but today the means of production is quite literally in almost everyone's hands. With me in the studio, I'm joined by Alison Gillwald from Research ICT Africa. Welcome, Alison.
Thank you.
And we're going to be asking you to participate in the discussion by sharing your feedback. Tonight's question is, should people get free basic airtime and SMS like we do water and electricity? Is that a right? You can SMS your answers to 074 103 6704 or drop us an email, freemedia@capetowntv.org. Alison, before we get into the conversation, let's take a look at this insert that really explains some of the power of a cell phone.
You work for social change. You want to have a positive impact on the way people live. You search for what's new and what's next. So here it is. Right now, you and close to 3.5 billion other people already have a tool that can help turn our world around. It's right in your hand. Mobile phones have changed the way we live, work, and organize ourselves. But that's just the start. Take a look at how people and organizations everywhere are using mobile phones to create a better future. Phones are used to track diseases and monitor patients with TB and HIV/AIDS in countries like Rwanda, Mali, and South Africa. In places as far apart as the United States, Indonesia, and Nigeria, people use SMS text messaging to learn about AIDS, breast cancer, and sexual health. In Syria, the World Food Programme uses mobile phones in humanitarian relief by texting refugees when food aid is available. Some relief organizations are dispensing cash for food to refugees via their mobile phones. 8 million Filipinos work abroad. Every day, many are victims of discrimination, trafficking, and slavery. These workers can now use their mobile phones to send a text message, like an SOS, to activate a network of advocates who help bring them home. In Egypt, videos and photos taken with mobile phones have exposed police abuses. Volunteers reported election results in real time via SMS in Sierra Leone, preventing violence and ensuring a fair election. Around the world, organizations, citizen groups, and individuals are using mobile phones to engage people in the issues that affect them. In South Africa, consumers can query an SMS info line for information about buying sustainable fish in the supermarket. In Zimbabwe, a country without a free media, people are using mobile phones to gather and report on news. And with a ping of a text message, Greenpeace Argentina mobilized a network of 500,000 mobile activistas who succeeded in passing the first forest protection law in the country. There's even more. Mobile phones are being used in the fight against poverty. Projects in Kenya and Japan help hundreds of day laborers find jobs through SMS marketplaces. Rural women in India are using mobile phones to keep track of small loans for their micro-enterprises. And farmers around the world are now using mobiles to access market prices for their goods. So, you see, no matter what field you're in, no matter where you are, there are so many ways to innovate with mobile phones. At mobileactive.org, you'll find yourself right in the center of the action, where you can explore a library of resources and connect with like-minded people with imagination and know-how to move your efforts to the next level.
Really amazing things you can do with the cell phone. Alison, you've just finished a study of 12 African countries looking at how people use their cell phones. What are some of the things that you are learning?
Well, I think what we've seen across East, South, West Africa, all of the countries that we looked at, is in many countries a significant reduction in the cost of mobile calls, of prepaid calls, and particularly in East Africa, and some successes in Ghana as well, where markets have been effectively regulated and they're reasonably competitive. What is interesting about that is that it's allowed people to do all sorts of other things with their cell phones. So it's really not just about accessing that, that service. It's about the price of the service that allows you to do certain things with it. So the costs in Kenya, for example, have come down so significantly that it's created opportunities for innovation around other services and applications, most notably, of course, M-Pesa, mobile banking, which about 90% of Kenyans who are using mobile phones are using.
And even in South Africa, you hear stories about people sending each other prepaid airtime as a way of getting around the complexities of our banking system and moving money around. But in South Africa, you've raised the question of price. Are we paying a fair price for our cell phones?
No, and I think it depends what you mean by a fair price. But we recently, after a year-long study of prepaid pricing, put out an index of pricing across 46 African countries that we were able to monitor prepaid prices over a year. And South Africa came 40th out of 46 in one measure and 30th and 32nd in the main overall measure. So it's got a long way to go. And
we're talking about a very developed network where a lot of the major investment has already taken place.
Yes, indeed.
I mean, is it fair to talk about profiteering in the industry?
Well, certainly, many people would describe the profits in terms of the EBITDAs, the measurements of profitability of the companies, as very high in this sector. Yes, there are issues of reinvesting in the network. Of course, they have got legacy networks, but they've also got new next generation networks that do require investment. But our prices are substantially above the cost of an efficient operator, which is a measure that is used across the globe to measure, to regulate prices. And until that has got down at the wholesale level, which is the interconnection level where the networks are talking to each other, it means that you can't really get competition on the retail price, on the end price that people are paying. So the interconnection, the wholesale charges, the prices that the operators are paying to each other are very, very high by continental standards. That's by African standards, not by some sort of mature European market with very high penetration levels.
But, I mean, we were told that we had to privatize telecom and create a more efficient free market telecommunication service. Why do we still sit with such high prices when there are a number of competitors?
Well, I think there are a number of competitors, but we effectively in the mobile market have a duopoly. We have two dominant operators who've been in the market from the very beginning. They came in 1993 with a long period before there was any competition, and they really consolidated that market before there was competition. All over the world, once you've got either one very dominant or two dominant players like that, it's very, very difficult for a new entrant to come into that market without extremely smart regulation from the regulator to lower the barriers to entry and to make it more competitive, particularly around this wholesale pricing that I was speaking about, because that really keeps competitors uncompetitive because they can't meet that basic cost.
So we've recently seen Cell C making a very dramatic challenge to the duopoly, bringing in much cheaper rates. How do you see that playing itself out?
Yeah. Well, I think what is interesting about it is that if we look at that index of prices and we look at the countries that are performing best, that have the lowest prepaid mobile prices, we're looking at markets that are well regulated and which have had regulatory interventions around this wholesale price, the interconnection price, because that essentially sets the level at which you can start building your business, your retail price. Those markets that have had effective interconnection regulation have been able to see competitors come in and put pricing pressure on incumbents. Now, In several of those markets, as I mentioned, Kenya, for example, Ghana, for example, where they've had successful interconnection interventions, those prices have come down very, very significantly. The market's actually grown because there have been more competitors in the market, unlike what operators said would happen. And in fact, over a short period of time, the operators, even the incumbent operators, are doing as well as ever. But the new entrants have been able to put that pricing pressure and bring down the prices and become viable.
Our regulator, which is ICASA, has attempted to address the interconnect fee. I mean, tell us, why haven't they been effective?
Yeah. Well, as I was saying, they have reduced it. We're on a 3-year glide path, which ends in 2013, which will bring the interconnection price for peak to about 40 cents from 125, 127 cents only 5 years ago. So it's a significant drop. Yet, by the time they get to the 40%, it will still be significantly higher than these other markets I mentioned, which will be looking at interconnection prices of about 5, 10, and 15 cents. So we're just sort of lagging. We're remaining further and further behind. The cost of an efficient operator globally is assessed at about 2 US cents, which is about 20 local cents.
I mean, some people have suggested that one of the problems with our regulator is that they've really been out-lawyered or even captured by the companies, that they don't have the political will or technical strength to challenge them. I mean, what's your view?
I think it's probably the biggest challenge to a successful environment, because in fact, there is a lot of evidence to demonstrate that well-regulated, competitive markets is what has driven, the uptake of services at affordable prices across the world. Where that happens, where that's taking place, we're seeing successes. And certainly in South Africa, we have a serious institutional crisis within the sector, with the regulator unable to regulate effectively for a range of reasons, which relate to the political appointment process, which relate to, complex systems of patronage and, cadre deployment and all sorts of things. So it's not really that, that cadre deployment in itself is wrong, but if you've got people who are unable to do the job through cadre deployment, that is an issue. There are a number of people who have not performed very well and are not cadres as well. So I'm just saying there are a number of things that have meant, that the outcomes have not been good in terms of decision making within ICASA.
Thanks. You're watching Free Media, Free Minds. We're looking at the question of cell phones. They bring so much power to us for media production and exchanging information. But we know the price is often prohibitive, and we're in discussion with Alison Gillwald, Research ICT Africa. We'll pick it up straight after this break.
Your local shop being robbed, your neighbor's house being broken into. And that's the sound of strength. With Magnador Security, you're given greater strength. Stainless steel slam lock, highest quality, and SABS approved company, Magnador is your strongest security gate option for burglar proofing solutions. Why compromise on your safety? Get the stronger one from Magnador. Magnador, the stronger one!
Welcome back to Free Media, Free Minds. We continue our discussion about the importance of cell phones for communication and some of the barriers to their use. In the studio, I'm with Alison Gillwald of Research ICT Africa, and we're now joined by Abongile Nyumbeka from the Social Justice Coalition. Welcome, Abongile. We'd also love to hear from you at home. We're asking tonight, should people get free basic airtime and SMS? Just like we get water and electricity. You can SMS your answers to 074 103 6704 or drop us an email at freemedia@capetowntv.org. Before we get back into the discussion, we're going to take a look at what the Right to Know campaign has been up to on this front.
People's lives seems to be centered around their cell phones now. I mean, for cell phone banking, communicating with their loved ones in the rural areas or people who are working in distant areas. But, I mean, cell phones seems to be the center of people's activities currently. The Right to Know thinks why does the right to know care about the use of cell phones is the issue of freedom of expression, that people have the right, to exercise their freedom of expression, especially now that the government seems to be discussing the issue of the secrecy bill. The belief is that once an issue is out there in the public, it's no longer classified, I think even, what is this dude in America? He made a similar point that it's going to be very difficult now to classify information, especially with people with access to information in their fingertips. People have power in their hands through the cell phones, but they cannot use them fully because of the cost associated with the airtime, with SMS, with with SMSs bundle. Cell phones airtime is expensive. Most people would use it for sending "please call me" or sending messages through the "please call me" application. That "please call, I'm at home," "please call, where is the key," and so forth. But had that been made easily for people to use SMSs for free, it would have been easy. For most to communicate. For free flow of information, it's necessary that that there must be cheap airtime. There must be, free SMSs. As the right to know, we demand that people have the right to call. Not only in emergency. There was a radio interview on Tuesday, and I wanted to speak on it. And I did not have the number, so I called MTN. But that cost me, cost me about R3 to call them to find out what is the station's telephone number. So that was too expensive for me. And so people have the right to make phone calls, and that will enable them to have access to information. While we might have one of the best constitutions, and that also talks about the right to freedom of expression and so forth, that is blocked or restricted by the expensive airtime that most people cannot access. Remember that South Africa is number one unequal society in the world. So it makes it very difficult for people to communicate even with their loved ones. If kids come back home because trains were late, or there's traffic jam and so forth, or when there's a disaster, they cannot communicate because that their movement or their means of communication is restricted by the expensive airtime. Why the airtime companies are making massive profits out of out of poor people's ability to communicate, I think that is unjust. Out of the millions, if not billions, that is made out of that, the companies should be able to give free airtime. It is the right of everyone to make a phone call. There are many people with cell phones out there that do not have fridges or any other thing, because cell phones are seen as a right, and so the right to know supports their right, that it is the right to call for everyone in South Africa or in the world for that matter. Internet is very important, especially for kids doing their assignments, for adults doing their research and so forth. Yes, there is a divide between those that can afford and those that do not have the means to access internet, meaning that this unevenness perpetuates the inequality that is in the country.
So really exciting work being taken up by the Right to Know campaign. Abongile, just how important are cell phones to people in Khayelitsha where you do your work?
I think the importance of cell phones where I work in Khayelitsha, because most of people that are living in Khayelitsha, they're using cell phones. They do not have access, most of them, to internet. So it will be wise for them to reach other information on cell phones. It can reach an ordinary person, whether it can buy a phone that is not much and expensive, or the phone that costs less than 200, cost around 150 rand. which is it will be wiser for government to try to.
Yeah. I mean, Alison, there's a statistic that basically says every household in South Africa, even the most rural and poor, has a cell phone. So access to the network is not a problem, but affordability seems to be a major limit.
Absolutely. I mean, I think firstly one needs to look at those figures with some skepticism. Essentially what operators are providing is the number of SIM cards sold. So that's how you get these 110, 115%, in terms of access. We all know people without any phones in rural and even in urban areas. That being said, they're clearly very pervasive. Our household access and usage survey, which we've just completed in South Africa, suggests that we're around 75%. So it is a significant resource for people. And what's clear from this is that people really value access to communications. They're prepared to spend significant amounts, sometimes concerning amounts, of their income in accessing the network.
Abongile, there are reports from places in the Eastern Cape where research has been done that people are spending more money on airtime than they are on food, often choosing to go hungry because they're hoping to get a job or hear some important news. I mean, what's your sense of cell phone prices? Are people paying a fair price?
I think the prices that the people are paying now, it's not fair. It's much expensive. Even if they use airtime. Sometimes you'd find out when there's an emergency comes in an area where I live in Khayelitsha. So people would struggle to call an ambulance or to call the police van to come. But however, if the SMSs were free, so it would much be easy or accessible. Although there are the cell phones, that means there's been not much accessibility because some other people are unemployed.
I mean, Alison, the right to communicate is in our constitution. It's a basic right like water and energy. Why should government not be providing or regulating at least to ensure that people have free basic services?
We actually have in South Africa a very sophisticated and good practice model of regulating pricing, which has been done all over the world. The problem is that it's just not been implemented adequately. And there are a number of things that are not right about the system. As I said, we do have limits to market entry. We have problems with regulation of the system. We should be able to have affordable prices with a well-regulated system. In fact, the problem with creating untransparent subsidies is that the operators don't take that money out of their private pockets and wallets. What often happens with these subsidies, especially if they're substantial, is that they actually keep up the price of services. So, for example, the universal service levy that's been levied on operators, a very significant levy, is sitting with billions of rands in a universal service fund that has not been accessed by the poor in terms of services. If they'd actually not put that onto operators and not put this additional cost onto them, but regulated the price properly, then people should be able to get prices that they can afford to pay.
But surely, rather than regulating the interconnect fee, we could be regulating the end user fee like we do in the petrol industry. You pay the same price, it allows enough profit to incentivize companies, and there's nothing, I mean, the same with electricity. There's an end user regulation, and there's a bulk amount that is given free to people to enable their human rights, whether they're employed or not, have income or not.
I think it's important to understand the nature of what we call infrastructure industries, of network industries, because the wholesale price, the interconnection price, and the retail price are linked. So certainly in terms of South African law, the regulator has the ability in law to regulate the end price and the wholesale price, but you cannot regulate the end price without bringing down what we call the cost elements in the network, the wholesale price. So, for example, as I said, if you are making a new entrant pay the same price as your price that you're paying on one of the dominant operators' networks, that price is not going to be brought down. You have to regulate the whole network in order for those prices to come down. The end price is not independent of the other prices. So that's quite important to understand, because if one doesn't understand those, the calls for subsidies can be misdirected. In fact, what you should be calling for is better regulation, because those prices should be regulated in a way that makes them affordable.
Yeah.
We've seen that across Africa, across India. People should be paying a couple of cents. And people should also know that they are entitled to make emergency calls when they have to, and these are by law free.
Yeah.
So the operators need to provide those for free. So there's a lot of...
I mean, Abongile, you're doing important work in Khayelitsha to get people to start to use their cell phones to make political change in our city. Tell us a bit about the project you're involved in.
The project Ulungisa, it is a project that is a reporting channel to a city that focuses on the service delivery. The service delivery focuses around the water and sanitation, where the community can be able to log a complaint through the Lungisa project, so that the Lungisa project will channel it to the relevant official in the city of Cape Town. So it would make it easier for them and cheap. The SMS would cost less than 20 cents, but with using the other social networks like Facebook, Twitter, and Mixit.
Right. So it's really a tool that puts the power in the hands of citizens, and they use their cell phones to hold people accountable. And I think it's really a taste of what's possible once everyone has a cell phone and everyone can be on the network. As we've heard this evening, there are major obstacles to that, being the cost of airtime. There's some research saying that the cost of an SMS is 0.00007 cents, the production cost. And yet we all know you're paying between 30 and 1 rand, even up from 1 rand for an SMS. So we're going to have to leave our conversation there for this evening. I think this is an issue that's very close to many of us, and I hope we can revisit it in the future. You've been watching Free Media, Free Minds on Cape Town TV, brought to you with support of the Friedrich Ebert Stichting and Alternative Information Development Center. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you again next week. Until then, let the information flow. Good night.